Hello, everyone. I'm sure many of you are getting familiar with this voice. I feel like I have a career in podcasting. But hello, it's Woosh Raza. I'm the head of HR and L&D at Phoenix Futures. And you are listening in to a special podcast that we thought we would be dedicating to our volunteers and talking about our volunteers as it's National Volunteers Week. So I am delighted to be joined this morning by the lovely Jane Slocombe. Hi, Jane.
Hi.
How are you?
I'm fine. Yes, I'm all good. Thank you. How are you?
Very well. Can't complain. The sun is shining, and we are here to talk about our lovely volunteers.
It's true. The sun is shining and we have lovely volunteers.
Absolutely. So we thought we would put a little podcast together to really dedicate some conversation and raise awareness about our brilliant volunteers across Phoenix Futures. Before we do, volunteering is obviously right now. We have seen the absolute best of humanity through this pandemic, and I mean on a global level. You know, the number of volunteers that have really helped support the NHS, who've helped support our country in terms of supporting those that are shielding, in terms of food parcels, in terms of providing support to those who are lonely. We've seen some really amazing examples of volunteering over the last kind of few months, certainly in light of the pandemic. So it is really great that we're talking about volunteers this morning. The estimated annual value of volunteers, just some fun facts for you, is £22.6 billion. That's the value of volunteers helping UK charities, which is very startling and really makes you take pause about the incredible contributions that volunteers do. We know that volunteering makes people feel good and it improves well-being, and we did know that around 67% of volunteers give their time to charities and community groups. So yeah, great some facts to, I guess, start the conversation. And we have over 150 volunteers that help us across Phoenix Futures. And in the spirit of talking about our lovely volunteers at Phoenix, I'm going to start asking Jane a little bit more about, I guess, we know that, well, I know that you use volunteers across Futures in Mind. It'd be great for our listeners for you to tell us a little bit more about what is Futures in Mind, and I guess how are volunteers used across the Futures in Mind project.
Okay, so Futures in Mind, we're based in Essex and we're a partnership of three organisations. So Phoenix Futures, Mind in Mid and North Essex and Mind in West Essex. And together we deliver an integrated recovery support advice and mentoring service that supports service users, carers and families who are affected by substance misuse and or mental ill health. So the volunteers are used in a variety of different ways. So we offer a befriending and mentoring scheme that where volunteers will meet with their service users in the community setting and provide support and advocacy and signposting for their service users. The volunteers can also support the other functions. So we have recovery, what we call welcome cafes across the county of Essex. And as that states, they are an environment where anybody can come along. And with that, the support of the volunteers and staff. Service users can come in. It's a welcoming environment where they can have a cup of tea, coffee, sit and chat. So it's around that sort of
Yeah,
social integration.
yeah,
Along that as well, we also have activities. So we have quite a diverse range of activities, such as recovery through nature. In partnership with Essex Wildlife Trust, we
yeah,
have boxing and gym type activities. Badminton we do. So we, very much the service is around co-production with our service users and our
yeah,
volunteers.
yeah,
So we look at activities and groups where the demands are of, those that want to use it, really.
Yeah. Great. I mean, that sounds really innovative. Great work, around, like you say, that kind of model of bringing that co-production in and working in partnership with others to really, to provide those services and provide that support. That sounds absolutely fantastic. So you've mentioned a little bit about the befriending and recovery cafes.
Mhm.
What kind of volunteer opportunities, I guess, are there across Futures in Mind? It sounds obviously there's a few that you've mentioned, so supporting the cafes and befriending. Any
Mhm.
more kind of opportunities, any other ways that volunteers are involved?
I mean, it really depends on the individual. So,
Yeah,
the volunteer that comes through to the service, they can either support a welcome calf.
yeah,
They
yeah,
can support a welcome calf and an activity. They can do that as well as befriending. So it's really down to the individual as to
mm,
what level and how much they want to volunteer with us.
yeah,
We also across Essex, not just within Futures in Mind, look at the skill sets of our volunteers
yeah,
and where they would like to develop and work.
yeah,
So, for example, we have volunteers with us, but are also working with one of the other Essex services, the alcohol recovery community,
right,
or
okay,
Full Circle. So, we very much, through the supervision process and development process, look at where the volunteers want to increase
yeah,
their knowledge and their skills.
yeah.
So, yeah.
That sounds great. Sounds like a really tailored approach. So it's kind of like, if you want to help and support, we'll make some, we'll fit that around kind of what our volunteers are doing, which is great actually. It's really getting that engagement up, and thinking about the volunteer as well as, the service, which is brilliant. What does the volunteer pathway look like then, Jane? I guess, how, in terms of traditional the route, I guess to get through to volunteers, and maybe from there, what does that look like as well?
Okay, so our volunteers across the service can come from anywhere. So, we do a lot of recruitment campaigns with volunteer organisations and agencies across
Yeah,
Essex. We have our social media, so we do again a lot of recruitment drive for volunteers across that. So the volunteers can come, from the wider public. So they may themselves not have any sort of lived experience of either substance misuse or mental health.
yeah,
Um, and the other kind of pathway is really if volunteers have themselves, been service users or have used a
yeah,
service, and are that much forward in their recovery, and want to, give something back to the
yeah,
wider community. So come through that way.
yeah,
And indeed, we across the Essex services, we now have staff that are employed with us that have come via that volunteer pathway,
yeah,
which is wonderful to see.
yeah,
Somebody that's coming via treatment of some description,
yeah. That was
and then
brilliant.
going through the volunteering, and then eventually um, going into employment with us.
Yeah, no, that is brilliant. Absolutely, it's great to see some of those ways of people moving through the pathway, and it does, like you say, sound so rewarding. From that rewarding perspective, I guess, volunteer achievements, I'm sure there are many, but I guess a flavour of some of the achievements of our volunteers. Have you got any kind of examples?
I mean, one of the really good examples is what I've just sort of said, when they go into some form of employment. So
Okay,
that's always a good achievement for
absolutely.
us, whether that's with us as an organisation, or whether that's to one of the wider treatment services across Essex. So that's good achievement. And I think achievement is very much person-centred. So again, an achievement could be somebody that's come through to volunteer for Futures in Mind, but through that development and supervision process builds up the confidence and the skills that can link in with one of the other services. And I mean, we've got a good example of a lady that we have with us who has been volunteering herself, has come from a treatment background, but is now supporting not just with us, but also with the alcohol recovery community, and is helping them to sort of facilitate their groups, and also working with their service users, supporting them on a one-to-one basis as well.
Brilliant. That sounds absolutely fantastic. And you mentioned earlier about recruitment and different ways that volunteers could come to kind of come through the pathway. How do we recruit? So I know you said you mentioned we work with agencies and suppliers. What's the kind of the interest levels, and what's that recruitment part look like?
The interest levels are really good. So, it's very much, we use the, as I said before, kind of the volunteer agencies across Essex, the service staff and the service coordinators will take out all of our information to any networking event. So, across Essex, we do a lot of partnership working. So at any kind of event, we take all our advertising stuff, so our banners, our pamphlets, and we very much discuss with the other professionals or the wider general public about volunteering and what the benefits are for volunteering, not just with Futures in Mind, but with Phoenix Futures as the wider organisation. So we always look at sort of new and different ways wherever we can to recruit for volunteers, because obviously we're aware that a lot of kind of organisations look for volunteers. So we try wherever we can to make our our service look attractive, where volunteers want to come through and give their time to us.
Absolutely. That sounds great, and a really wide-ranging approach to try and get interest. And it's great to hear that there's a really strong level of interest across the board. You mentioned as well earlier, Jane, you mentioned about the support. I think you mentioned supervision, but it'd be great to just talk about how do we support our volunteers, I guess, whilst they're volunteering with us.
So our volunteers are supported by supervision. So they will have supervision with their service coordinators.
Right.
No different than what we do as staff.
Yeah, brilliant.
They also get their support from their wider peers. So for those that are volunteering within the cafes and the activities, so there is still that peer support there as well. So that's we support them also if there's an expression of training needs, so we support them with that as well, either signposting them through to the appropriate organisation for that training need, or we as a service look to provide that training for our volunteers. So things like safeguarding, emergency first aid at work training. So that's the sort of the training opportunities that we can provide, and it's not exhaustive really. Mental health first aid. So it's really again about that co-production. So it's about what the volunteers are telling us as staff, what sort of training needs that they would like to have and would like to see. So that's very much where we adapt that training to the needs of the volunteers.
That sounds great. And it's again, really kind of individualized approach, which is brilliant, and treating our volunteers, I guess, in this, from a staffing perspective, giving them the same access to support, which is absolutely brilliant. It's been a really good chat, Jane. I've certainly learned a lot more about some of the
Thank you.
ways in which no worries, our volunteers have been are engaging with us right now. I guess final, to any volunteers listening, I guess a thank you or a final note from you, Jane, I guess.
Yes, I'd just like to say a massive great thank you to all of our volunteers across Futures in Mind, Essex and the wider Phoenix Futures. Thank you so much for what you do. Thank you so much for your time and commitment. And we certainly couldn't do what we do without your support and dedication. So thank you. Thank you very much.
Yeah, great message, and to echo, I guess, Jane's comments as well. A huge thank you from me. You are very much part of our Phoenix family and our Phoenix community, and yeah, we absolutely recognise that this is your week to celebrate our lovely volunteers. So thank you as well from myself and the HR and L&D team and the wider organisation. So thanks so much for joining us, Jane,
Thank you.
and take care.
Yeah, it was a pleasure. Thank you, Woosh.
No problem. Thanks, Jane.
Bye.
Bye bye.
Bye bye.